Damon Cole was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, he believed he had built something real. A landscaping company with 22 employees, most of them from his own neighborhood. A marriage of 6 years to a woman he supported, trusted, and never once questioned. He was the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and brought his mother-in-law food from her favorite restaurant, just because it was a Tuesday. That afternoon, he knocked on her door with a container of Caribbean food in his hand and loyalty in his chest. She didn't answer, so he walked around to announce himself, and stopped cold. Through a cracked kitchen window, he overheard his mother-in-law on a call with his wife. He heard his own name. What followed was 90 seconds that dismantled 6 years of his life. His wife's voice, laughing, calling him predictable, calling him easy, detailing a 2-year affair, a secret account draining $34,000 from everything he'd built, and a fabricated abuse scheme designed to strip away the rest. Both women believed they were completely alone. They had no idea what kind of man they had underestimated, and they had no idea what was coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning air was crisp as Damon Cole guided a commercial mower onto the loading ramp of his company truck. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the yard was already alive with activity. Marvin Gaye's smooth voice drifted from a small radio, perched on a workbench, singing about mercy and healing. "Morning, Marcus," Damon called out to a young man checking fluid levels in one of the smaller trucks. "How's Amy feeling? That cold getting any better?" "Much better, Mr. Cole. That soup your mama sent over worked miracles." Marcus grinned, tucking his clipboard under his arm. Damon nodded, pleased. He'd mentioned Marcus's sick daughter to his mother last week, and she'd immediately packed up her famous chicken soup. That's how things worked in his world. You took care of your people. One by one, his employees arrived. Damon greeted each one personally. Teresa with her coffee thermos decorated by her kids, James still yawning from his night classes, Curtis, who'd been with him since the beginning, already organizing the day's route maps. 22 people, 22 families depending on Cole grounds management. Damon felt the weight of that responsibility every morning, and it made him stand taller. Inside his office, really just a converted shipping container with a desk and filing cabinets, Damon checked the day's schedule. The phone rang exactly at 6:45 a.m. His mother, punctual as always. "Morning, Mama," he answered, settling into his chair. "You eating enough?" she asked, skipping pleasantries as usual. "I know you're up before the birds." "Yes, ma'am. Made that frittata recipe you sent yesterday." They talked while he reviewed contracts, his mother's voice a familiar comfort as she updated him on neighborhood gossip and church news. Before hanging up, she paused. "You sound tired, baby. Everything okay at home?" Damon's pen stopped moving. "Just busy, Mama. You know how it is." Later that evening, Damon pulled into his driveway. The house lights were on, but something felt off. He'd suggested a weekend at that bed and breakfast in Virginia that Priya used to love, but her response had been oddly flat. "I've got this grant proposal," she'd said, not meeting his eyes. "Maybe next month." Inside, Priya was at the kitchen island, laptop open, typing rapidly. She barely looked up when he entered. "There's leftover curry in the fridge," she said, fingers still moving across the keyboard. Damon heated his dinner, watching her from the corner of his eye. 6 years of marriage had taught him her rhythms, her habits, the way she usually hummed while working, how she'd take breaks to stretch every hour. Tonight, she was too still, too focused. While she showered, Damon noticed her laptop still open. Out of habit, he moved to close it, and paused. The login screen showed a password prompt. New. Different. In 6 years, Priya had never locked her computer. He closed the laptop gently, filed the detail away with others that had been collecting. The conference last month she'd been vague about. The new clothes she called her self-care phase. Weekend trips with friends whose names she never quite specified. Priya emerged from the shower in silk pajamas, also new, and performed a quick kiss on his cheek. "I'm exhausted. Don't stay up too late." Damon stood at the sink, washing dishes, letting the warm water run over his hands. The kitchen window reflected his image back at him, overlaid against the darkness outside. He looked the same as always: broad shoulders, steady hands, the face of a man who built things that lasted. He dried a plate, remembering how Priya used to sit on the counter while he cleaned up, telling him about her day. When had that stopped? He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. The dishwasher hummed. Water dripped from the faucet. In the reflection, Damon watched himself stack plates with the same care he used to organize his work crews, plan his contracts, build his company from nothing but a borrowed mower and determination. His hands were steady as he dried them on a dish towel. The unease sat in his chest like a stone, but he didn't chase it. Not yet. He just noted it, the way he noted everything, carefully, quietly, thoroughly. The kitchen window showed him his own face, calm and still. Something was wrong. The knowledge settled into him without drama, without fanfare. He just didn't know what it was. Not yet. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds as Damon packed his lunch. Priya breezed in, already dressed in one of her new suits, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I'll have the final draft ready by Friday," she said to whoever was on the line. Covering the phone, she whispered to Damon, "Huge grant proposal this week. I'll be working late every night." Damon nodded, spreading mustard on his sandwich. "Need me to handle dinner?" "Actually," Priya said, "Mom's coming to town. She offered to help around the house while I'm swamped. You know how she is, can't stand to see me stressed." "That's thoughtful of her," Damon replied, wrapping his sandwich. "She's staying at that rental again?" "Same place as last time. She likes being close to that little park." Priya gathered her bags. "Don't wait up tonight, okay?" After she left, Damon stood in the quiet kitchen. Adesi's favorite Caribbean restaurant was on his way to the Thompson property he was bidding on. He could drop off lunch, make sure she was settling in okay. The morning passed in a blur of estimates and crew assignments. At noon, Damon pulled into Caribbean Delights, ordering Adesi's usual curry goat with extra plantains, rice and peas on the side. The owner, Miss Jean, added an extra container of sauce for the mother-in-law. The rental house sat on a quiet suburban street, tidy and unremarkable except for the well-tended flower beds. Adesi always chose places with good gardens. Damon parked, grabbed the warm container of food, and headed up the front walk. His knock echoed against the door. No answer. He was about to text when he heard voices from around back. The spring air carried fragments of conversation through what must be an open window. Damon started down the stone path that curved around the house, careful not to step on the fresh mulch. A hydrangea bush, heavy with purple blooms, marked the corner. He was about to call out when he heard his name. "Damon has no idea," Priya's voice said clearly. The call was on speaker, her words sharp in the quiet yard. "He actually suggested a weekend away. Can you believe it?" Damon went still beside the hydrangea. Its flowers bobbed gently in the breeze. "And you're certain Bradley's timeline works?" Adesi asked. "We need everything in place before—" "Bradley's already found us a place," Priya interrupted. "God, it feels good not pretending anymore. 2 years is a long time to keep sneaking around. You've done well, my dear. And Bradley's been so patient, letting us use the house for your meetings." The food container was warm against Damon's palms. He stood motionless, each word striking like a hammer. "The lawyer you recommended is perfect, Mom. She says, with the documentation we've been collecting, we can paint a clear picture of emotional and financial abuse. All those times I documented him working late, controlling the household accounts. The judge will see exactly what we need him to see," Adesi said smoothly. Your father tried similar tactics in our divorce. Men like that, they never expect to be outmaneuvered. Priya laughed, the sound like breaking glass. That's what I love about Damon. He's so predictable, always bringing you food, asking about church, trying to take care of everyone. It makes him easy. He'll never see this coming. With movements that felt underwater slow, Damon pulled out his phone. His fingers found the record button without looking. He captured their voices discussing specifics, dates, accounts, manufactured incidents. Bradley's contact at the venture firm already has a position lined up for me, Priya continued. Once the divorce is filed, I can transition smoothly. No more non-profit salary. Everything is falling into place, Adaize said. Just keep playing your role a little longer. Your grant deadline gives us the perfect cover to finalize details this week. 90 seconds of damning evidence recorded. The call wrapped up with plans to meet later. Damon stood in the garden his mother-in-law had praised so often, surrounded by flowers she'd pointed out on his last visit, holding food she'd claimed to love. The walk back to his truck felt miles long. He placed the container on the passenger seat. Caribbean spices now sickly sweet in the enclosed space. His hands found the steering wheel, the same hands that had built his company from nothing, that remembered every employee's children's names, that had held Priya's on their wedding day. 4 minutes passed. He watched them tick by on the dashboard clock, each second carrying away another piece of the life he thought he had. The food sat untouched beside him. A final act of kindness turned monument to betrayal. When the 4th minute ended, Damon started his truck. He had crews to supervise, contracts to review, a company to run. He pulled away from the curb, leaving behind Adaize's perfect garden and its blooming hydrangeas. The sun was setting when Damon pulled into his driveway. Priya's car was already there. Unusual for her typical late nights. He found her curled on the couch in yoga pants and an oversized sweater. Laptop balanced on her knees. "You're home early," he said, hanging his keys on the hook by the door. "Had to get out of the office," Priya sighed, rubbing her temples. "The lighting was giving me a migraine. Thought I could focus better here." Damon nodded, moving to the kitchen. "I'll make dinner. You work." He pulled ingredients from the fridge. Chicken, vegetables, the rice Priya preferred. His movements were measured, each action deliberate. The sound of Priya's typing followed him, punctuated by occasional sighs of manufactured frustration. "The grant proposal's almost done," she called out. "Just need to polish the budget section." "That's good," Damon replied, chopping onions with precise strokes. The knife felt heavy in his hand. He remembered teaching her to cook in this kitchen, her laughter when she'd burned the rice. Had that been real? Or just another performance? They ate at the kitchen island, Priya picking at her food between complaints about deadline pressure. Damon asked the right questions, made the right sympathetic sounds. When she mentioned Adaize's arrival, he managed to keep his expression neutral. "Mom's really being a lifesaver this week," Priya said, pushing rice around her plate. "She knows how these grant cycles wear me down." "That's what family's for," Damon replied, the words tasting like ash. Later, after loading the dishwasher and watching Priya take her evening shower, he waited until her breathing settled into sleep's rhythm. The bedside clock read 11:42 p.m. when he slipped out to his home office. The room was dark except for his laptop's glow. He'd built this business from here, tracking early contracts and payroll on Excel sheets, growing from one truck to a fleet. Now he pulled up those files with new purpose, separating what was legally his alone from what they shared. His phone felt heavy as he dialed Jerome's number. His uncle answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Everything okay, nephew?" "Need you to listen to something," Damon said quietly. He played the recording, letting Priya and Adaize's voices fill the silence. Jerome didn't interrupt, didn't make a sound until the last word faded. "Tell me what you need," Jerome said simply. The weight of decades of loyalty in those 5 words. Everything you can find on Bradley Holt. Their timeline, the lawyer they're working with. I need to know how deep this goes. Consider it done? Jerome paused. You holding up? I'm working, Damon replied. It was answer enough. After hanging up, he opened his encrypted messaging app. Candace Rivers' contact info waited there. His friend since college, now one of D.C.'s sharpest family law attorneys. He typed carefully. Need to understand my position before I make any moves. Her response came quickly. Call my office first thing. We'll protect what you've built. Damon spent the next hour organizing financial documents, incorporation papers, equipment titles, property deeds. Each paper represented years of early mornings, careful planning, trust built with clients and crews. He wouldn't lose it to manufactured allegations. When he finally returned to bed, Priya had shifted in her sleep. One arm stretched across his pillow. He lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. The man who'd loved her was already gone, replaced by someone cooler, more focused. She'd called him predictable. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Morning came as it always did. Damon loaded trucks, assigned crews, reviewed contracts. He answered calls, approved supply orders, met with clients. If his employees noticed anything different about him, they didn't show it. Late afternoon brought Jerome's call. Made some initial contacts, his uncle said. Got people looking into Bradley Holt's background, the lawyer's connections. I'll have more soon. Appreciate it, Damon replied, watching the sun sink behind his fleet of trucks. After hanging up, he stood at his office window. Tomorrow he'd wake up early. He'd kiss Priya goodbye as she left for her fictional grant work. He'd run his crews, build his contacts, protect his business. And beneath it all, he'd be someone new. Someone shaped by betrayal, but not broken by it. He locked his office and walked to his truck, keys heavy in his pocket. The company yard was quiet, equipment cleaned and parked in neat rows. He climbed into the driver's seat, the same seat where he'd sat frozen yesterday outside a Daisy's rental. The man who'd stood beside that hydrangea bush, holding food meant as a gesture of love, was already fading. In his place sat someone harder, clearer, more dangerous in his patience than any rage could make him. Damon started his truck and headed home to make dinner for his wife. Jerome's black F-150 sat idle in the hardware store parking lot, exhaust curling in the morning chill. Damon pulled up beside it, killed his engine, and crossed to the passenger side of his uncle's truck. Jerome handed him a coffee without speaking. Black, no sugar, the way they both took it. What did you find? Damon asked, though something in Jerome's expression already told him it wasn't good. Jerome reached behind his seat and produced a manila folder. My contact at the forensics firm finished his preliminary review. You might want to take a minute with this. Damon opened the folder. Column after column of highlighted transactions stretched across the pages. Small withdrawals from his joint account with Priya, none large enough to trigger attention. 200 here, 300 there, spaced carefully over 14 months, all flowing to an account he'd never known existed. $34,612 total, Jerome said quietly. She built it slow, methodical. Classic extraction pattern. Damon's coffee cooled untouched in the cup holder as he studied the documents. Each withdrawal represented a moment of calculated betrayal. A dinner out when she'd claimed to work late. A weekend conference that never existed. A spa retreat with imaginary friends. There's more, Jerome continued, pulling out another sheet. My guy traced some of her recent purchases. That new wardrobe she started building last spring. The luxury spa weekend in Virginia. That leadership conference in Boston. None of it came from your accounts or hers. Bradley Holt, Damon said, the name bitter on his tongue. Jerome nodded. He's been bankrolling her lifestyle upgrades for months, setting her up for the transition he planned to offer. Classic predator move. Create dependency while maintaining deniability. Damon closed the folder, his movements deliberately controlled. "I need to see Candace. Already called her office. She's expecting you at 2. The drive to D.C. gave Damon time to process. Each mile marker ticked past like the beats of a clock, counting down to something he couldn't stop. By the time he reached Candace's office building, his anger had cooled into something harder, more focused. Candace Rivers hadn't changed since college. Still sharp-eyed, direct, with a presence that filled her corner office. She studied the recording and financial documents in silence, her expression growing darker with each page. "Let me be clear," she said finally, setting down her pen. "These abuse allegations they're planning? They'd never stick. Your business records are clean, your community standing is strong, and there's not a single complaint in your history. But that's not their real play." "Explain," Damon said. "They don't need to win the allegations. They just need to force you to fight them." Candace leaned forward. "A drawn-out legal battle would drain your resources, damage your reputation even if you're cleared, and pressure you toward settlement just to make it stop. It's a leverage play, not a legal one." She outlined his options, emphasizing the importance of appearing normal while she prepared his legal position. "Every day Priya thinks she has the upper hand is a day we can use to protect you," she explained. "Let her keep believing her timeline is safe." Evening found Damon alone in his company yard, sitting in his office as the last light faded. The payroll sheet on his desk listed 22 names, men and women who depended on the business he'd built. People with families, mortgages, dreams of their own. He traced each name with his finger, remembering their stories. Marcus, who'd started as a day laborer and now ran his own crew. Sarah, a single mother who'd found stability managing the office. Devon, fresh out of trade school, learning the business from the ground up. 22 lives connected to his, all vulnerable to the damage Priya's manufactured allegations could cause. The weight of it settled onto his shoulders, not just his marriage or his assets, but the entire ecosystem of trust and opportunity he'd created. A false abuse claim wouldn't just hurt him. It would shake every contract, every business relationship, every community connection he'd carefully built. He folded the payroll sheet carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket, like a reminder of what was at stake. The yard was quiet as he locked up, equipment sitting in neat rows under security lights. Each truck bore his company name, Coal Grounds Management, painted in clean white letters against forest green. Climbing into his own truck, Damon felt the full gravity of what he was fighting to protect. Not just his reputation or his bank accounts, but something larger, a foundation of trust and dignity built one contract, one employee, one early morning at a time. He started the engine, the familiar rumble grounding him in the present moment. The roses were yellow, Priya's favorite. Damon placed them in a crystal vase, a wedding gift from her mother, and arranged them carefully on the kitchen counter. When Priya came home, her smile carried the particular warmth of someone who believed they were still trusted. "They're beautiful," she said, touching a petal. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Damon replied, his voice gentle. "Just thought you might like them." Over dinner, he asked about her latest board meeting. She launched into a detailed story about fundraising goals and donor relationships, gesturing with her fork as she spoke. Damon nodded at all the right moments, asked follow-up questions that showed he was listening. When she mentioned feeling stressed about next quarter's targets, he reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We should look at that vacation property in Virginia next year," he said. "The one you showed me in that magazine. Might be good to have a quiet place to decompress." The flash of satisfaction in her eyes was quick but unmistakable. She squeezed his hand back, her wedding ring catching the light. When a daze arrived that weekend, her suitcase wheels clicking on the driveway, Damon met her at the door with the same warm smile he'd always given her. He carried her bags inside, asked about her flight, told her how much they'd been looking forward to her visit. That evening he stood in the kitchen helping her prepare dinner, chopping onions while she seasoned the soup, a Nigerian recipe she'd made for family gatherings countless times before. The domesticity of the scene could have been from any weekend in the past 6 years. "This smells amazing," he said, inhaling the aromatic steam. "Nobody makes it quite like you do." Adaize beamed, stirring the pot with practiced movements. "The secret is patience," she said. "Some things cannot be rushed." The irony of her words settled in the air between them, unnoticed by her but heavy in Damon's chest. He refilled her water glass, asked about her church back home, listened to her stories about the building renovation project she was helping coordinate. A block away, Jerome's truck sat quietly, its presence a steady anchor through the weekend's performance. Inside the truck was a fresh file, the latest intelligence his investigator had uncovered about Bradley Holt. The pattern was clear and documented. Chicago, 2018. Bradley had pursued Sarah Mitchell, a corporate lawyer in an unstable marriage. He'd accelerated her divorce with promises of a better life, then disappeared within 8 months. Boston, 2020. Rebecca Torres, a museum curator whose husband traveled frequently for work. Bradley had inserted himself during a rough patch, encouraged the split, then moved on before the divorce was even final. 3 other cities, 3 other women, each story following the same template. Bradley Holt wasn't looking for love or even companionship. He was a collector of transitional moments, a predator who specialized in women questioning their marriages. He offered glimpses of a more exciting life, leveraged their dissatisfaction, then vanished once the destruction was complete. Jerome had assembled the evidence meticulously: credit card records showing parallel timelines, property records revealing temporary residences in each city, social media posts documenting the pattern of engagement and withdrawal. The file was comprehensive, damning, and, for now, quietly waiting. Damon absorbed this information with the same controlled calm he brought to every revelation. He filed it away in the growing archive of evidence, knowing its moment would come, but not yet needing to know how. Jerome kept the physical file separate, his own plans for it taking shape in ways he hadn't yet shared with his nephew. The weekend proceeded with practiced normalcy. They ate meals together, shared stories, looked at old photos Adaize had brought. Damon remembered to laugh at the right moments, to lean in with interest when Priya and her mother discussed family gossip, to offer coffee and dessert with genuine-seeming warmth. On Sunday afternoon, Adaize packed her suitcase while Priya helped gather her toiletries. Damon could hear them talking quietly upstairs, their voices carrying the comfortable rhythm of conspirators who believed their secret was still safe. He loaded Adaize's bags into her car, hugged her goodbye with the same respect he'd always shown her. She patted his cheek, a maternal gesture that once meant something different, and settled into the driver's seat. Standing in the doorway beside Priya, Damon watched Adaize's car disappear down the street. The autumn air carried a hint of approaching winter. He closed the door with deliberate gentleness, the soft click of the latch marking the end of one more carefully managed performance. Inside, he returned to his preparations, quiet, methodical, and as patient as the soup Adaize had taught him would never be rushed. The morning air was crisp when Jerome's name lit up Damon's phone screen. "Need to see you," Jerome said. "My place, soon as you can." Something in his uncle's voice made Damon's shoulders tighten. He told his crew he had a meeting and drove the familiar route to Jerome's modest row house, where he'd spent countless Sunday afternoons as a kid learning how to fix engines and read people. Jerome answered the door before Damon could knock. The house smelled of coffee and old wood. They sat at the kitchen table, the same scarred oak surface where Jerome had taught him to clean his first carburetor. "My contact pulled together more than we expected," Jerome said, sliding a folder across the table. "Might want to brace yourself for this one." Damon opened the folder and began reading. His hands, calloused from years of physical work, remained perfectly steady as the full scope of the betrayal revealed itself. Priya had been meeting with a divorce attorney for over 8 months. long before Damon overheard the conversation at Adaise's rental. Regular consultations, carefully timed to coincide with her networking lunches and donor meetings. But that wasn't the cut that went deepest. The attorney had been specifically recommended by Adaise. Not just recommended. Selected with surgical precision. This particular lawyer had a long-standing professional connection to a family court judge in their district. The judge, in turn, was deeply embedded in Adaise's church network, owing favors that stretched back years through various community projects and referral arrangements. The manufactured abuse documentation wasn't just going to be alleged. It was going to be guided through a carefully constructed pipeline, shepherded by people who owed Adaise consideration. The very system meant to ensure justice had been quietly compromised. They built themselves a highway, Jerome said quietly. Been paving it for months. Damon stared at the documentation. Meeting dates, professional connections, a web of relationships mapped out in Jerome's precise investigator's handwriting. He thought about Adaise's soup, about patience, about things that couldn't be rushed. I need 24 hours, he said finally. Jerome nodded. Take what you need. Files not going anywhere. Damon drove to work, managed his crews, reviewed contracts, and carried the weight of this new knowledge like lead in his chest. He didn't call Candace immediately. He let the full implications settle, examining them from every angle the way he'd examine a failing retaining wall or an unstable grade. The next morning, he contacted Candace through their secure channel and sent her everything Jerome had uncovered. Her response was immediate. My office. 2 hours. In her D.C. office, Candace's usual professional calm had an edge of contained fury. She spread the documents across her desk, her finger tapping the connection points Jerome had identified. This goes beyond strategy, she said. This is corruption of process. They weren't just planning to hurt you. They were planning to rig the system itself. She began typing rapidly on her computer. I'm filing a preemptive petition right now in Montgomery County. Different jurisdiction, different judge. We're taking their entire pipeline off the table before they know we found it. Damon watched her work, understanding the significance. By filing first, he would control the opening move. The careful path Priya and Adaise had constructed would lead nowhere. I want you to understand something, Candace said, looking up from her screen. What they planned here. This isn't just wrong. It's the kind of wrong that can end careers and trigger ethics investigations. They tried to turn the legal system into a weapon. Evening found Damon at his company yard, reviewing equipment logs as the sun set. Most of the crew had gone home, but Curtis, who'd been with him since the first contract, was still there, organizing tools with the careful attention he brought to everything. Curtis worked quietly for a few moments, then spoke without looking up. Boss, I don't know what's weighing on you lately, but you seem like a man carrying something heavy. He paused, his weathered hands still moving steadily over the tools. Whatever it is, just remember, nobody can take what you built. Not really. The simple truth of those words hit Damon in a way nothing else had. He thanked Curtis, walked to his truck, and sat in the darkness. For exactly 60 seconds, he allowed himself to feel everything. The grief, the rage, the deep ache of betrayal. He let it wash over him like a wave, acknowledging its power without letting it pull him under. When the minute was up, he started the engine. He picked up his phone and called Jerome. Schedule the dinner, he said. The morning sun cast long shadows across Candace's office as Damon reviewed the LLC restructuring documents. She had arranged them in precise stacks, each representing a different aspect of protection they were putting in place. Everything here maintains complete legal compliance, Candace explained, tapping the first stack. We're not hiding assets. We're properly documenting what was already yours before the marriage. The key is establishing clear timelines and ownership structures. Damon nodded, signing where indicated. The familiar scratch of his pen felt weightier today. Each signature reinforced the walls around what he'd built. The municipal contract, Candace continued, sliding forward another document, is particularly important to protect. At $1.2 million, it's exactly the kind of asset they'd target. But since we're filing the restructuring before their planned move, it's clearly separated from marital property. While they worked, Jerome sat in Candace's waiting room, assembling what he called the truth package. His investigator's precision showed in how he organized each element. Financial records in chronological order, phone recording transferred to a clean device, timeline of events written in clear, unembellished language that left no room for misinterpretation. The manila envelope for a days required special attention. Jerome had documented every connection in the compromised legal referral network. Meetings, dates, professional relationships, the careful web of favors that made their scheme possible. It was devastating in its completeness. "This stays sealed until the moment," Jerome said when Damon emerged from Candace's office. "Maximum impact comes from them not having time to construct explanations." They drove separately to Jerome's house, where Bradley Holt's investigative file waited in a separate locked drawer. This wasn't for the dinner table. This was ammunition held in reserve, a sword of Damocles that Jerome would know exactly when to drop. "The timing matters," Jerome said, pouring coffee. "We don't waste this by using it too early." Bradley Holt's pattern across multiple cities, multiple women. That's not just evidence of character. That's a career ender if it hits the right desk. Damon sat at Jerome's kitchen table, absorbing the morning's work. Every detail had been considered, every angle covered. Now came the part that would test his control most directly. He picked up his phone and called Priya. His voice was warm, natural, the product of weeks of careful practice in emotional containment. "I've been thinking," he said when she answered. "We haven't had a proper family dinner in ages. Your mom's here, Tola and BC are visiting. Why don't we have everyone over? Jerome, too. Just reconnect a bit." Priya's response was enthusiastically positive, exactly as he knew it would be. She believed she had weeks before her planned reveal. A family dinner played perfectly into her timeline. One last performance of normal before she detonated everything. "That sounds wonderful," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice, the satisfaction of someone who believed they held all the cards. "I'll call Mom and the girls. When were you thinking?" "Saturday," he suggested. "I'll cook." The arrangements fell into place easily. Priya would handle the sides. He would manage the main course. Adaisi offered to bring dessert. Tola and Bissy expressed genuine enthusiasm. They had always been fond of Damon, having no idea of what their aunt and cousin had engineered. That evening, after everything was set, Damon sat in his home office and called his mother. The sound of her voice, the voice that had guided him through every hard moment of his life, steadied him. "Mama," he said softly, "I need you to know something. I'm going to be fine." There was a pause, filled with years of understanding between them. "I know, baby," she replied. "I know." After they hung up, Damon kept the phone in his hand, sitting in the quiet of his office. The weight of tomorrow pressed against him, but it wasn't crushing weight anymore. It was the weight of truth finding its moment, of justice taking its proper shape. On his desk lay the final pieces of preparation, seating arrangements that would prevent easy exits, a precise schedule that would allow the evidence to unfold in the most devastating sequence, small details that would ensure no one could claim misunderstanding or confusion when the moment came. He thought about Curtis's words from yesterday, about how no one could take what he built. Looking at the careful architecture of tomorrow's revelation, Damon understood that Curtis had been right in ways he couldn't have known. They hadn't just failed to take what he built. They had underestimated his capacity to build something new, a strategy for justice that would leave no room for denial or escape. The aroma of jollof rice and grilled fish filled Damon's kitchen as he put the finishing touches on dinner. Each dish was prepared with the same precision he brought to every aspect of his life. Measured, controlled, purposeful. The table settings were arranged exactly as planned, with subtle attention to positioning that would become important later. Jerome arrived first, right on time, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the easy smile that had helped him gather information throughout his career. He clasped Damon's shoulder wordlessly, a gesture that contained years of understanding. "Smells good in here," Jerome said, moving naturally to help with the final preparations. They worked in comfortable silence, both men aware of the weight of what was coming, but showing nothing in their movements or expressions. Tola and Bissy arrived next, bringing the bright energy of young women who had no idea they were walking into anything but a family dinner. They hugged Damon warmly. They had always liked their cousin's husband, appreciated his quiet strength, and the way he remembered their favorite foods whenever they visited. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," Tola said, taking in the spread. "It's no trouble," Damon replied, and meant it. Every detail mattered tonight. Adaze arrived last, carrying a store-bought dessert, and wearing the particular smile of someone who believed they were fully in control of events. She embraced Priya first, then turned to Damon with practiced warmth. "My son," she said, reaching to hug him, "always taking such good care of us." Damon accepted the embrace, his face betraying nothing of what he knew about her role in engineering his destruction. He simply smiled and guided her to her seat, carefully chosen to be directly across from where the documents would be placed. Priya moved through the kitchen with relaxed confidence, pouring wine and touching Damon's arm with casual intimacy. She was beautiful tonight, wearing a dress he had bought her last Christmas. The sight of her performing love so convincingly might have broken him weeks ago. Now it simply confirmed the righteousness of what was about to happen. The first 45 minutes unfolded exactly as choreographed. Jerome told entertaining stories about his days on the force, carefully edited to keep the mood light. Tola and Bissy shared updates about their lives, new jobs, potential relationships, plans for travel. Adaze offered maternal wisdom and community gossip. Priya laughed at all the right moments. Damon participated naturally in the conversation while noting every detail. How Priya's hand lingered on her phone when it buzzed, how Adaze's eyes flickered between her daughter and son-in-law, measuring their performance. He saw the moment Priya relaxed completely, believing this was just another family dinner she had successfully navigated. The plates were nearly empty when Damon set his fork down with deliberate care. The small sound seemed to fill the room. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly. "There's something I need to share with this table, and it's important that everyone hears it at the same time." He reached for the stack of documents Jerome had prepared, placing them in the center of the table with precise movements. His phone followed, positioned directly in front of him. Without further preamble, he pressed play. The recording was crystal clear, Priya and Adaze's voices filling the dining room with devastating clarity. Their casual discussion of manufactured abuse allegations, their laughter about his predictability, their detailed plans for using a compromised legal system to destroy him. Damon watched each face as the 90 seconds played out. Priya went absolutely still, the color draining from her face. Adaze's practiced smile froze, then cracked. Tola and Bissy sat in stunned silence, their eyes widening as they absorbed the reality of what their aunt and cousin had planned. When the recording ended, Tola stood abruptly. She addressed Adaze in rapid Yoruba, her voice sharp with disgust. Though Damon didn't understand the words, their impact was clear in how Adaze seemed to physically recoil. With the same steady control he brought to managing his business, Damon began walking through the financial evidence. He detailed the hidden accounts, the pattern of siphoned money, the manufactured documentation. His voice remained measured as he explained the web of compromised legal referrals Adaze had arranged. The manila envelope made a soft sound as he slid it across the table to Adaze. Everything you need to know about the consequences of your choices is in there, he said quietly. Adiza's attempt at reframing was immediate but desperate. You don't understand, she said. Damon is difficult. I was protecting my daughter. A mother must what? Tola cut in, switching to English. Must help destroy an innocent man? Priya finally found her voice. Damon, please, she said. It got out of hand. Bradley meant nothing. We can... Damon turned to look at her fully. You didn't do this because you fell out of love, he said, his voice carrying the weight of weeks of contained truth. You thought I was too simple to see, and too soft to respond. I need you to understand what it costs to be wrong about a man like me. He stood, his height suddenly filling the room. With genuine warmth, he thanked Tola and Bisi for coming, embracing each of them. They hugged him back fiercely, their sympathy and shock evident in their faces. He walked Jerome to the door, exchanging a look that contained volumes of shared understanding. Then, without another word to Priya or Adiaze, he got in his truck and drove to his mother's house, where she was already waiting with fresh coffee and the unconditional love that had shaped him into the man he was. The morning after the dinner, Damon arrived at his company yard before dawn, just as he had every day for years. He unlocked the gates, started the coffee maker in the break room, and began reviewing the day's work orders. His phone buzzed occasionally with messages he chose not to read. By 7, his crews were loading equipment and heading out to their assigned sites. Business continued. But elsewhere, carefully laid dominoes began to fall. Candace Rivers submitted her formal complaint to the Bar Association with surgical precision. The documentation was comprehensive, a detailed timeline connecting Adaze's church network to the compromised attorney referral pipeline, supported by financial records and witness statements. Within days, a preliminary inquiry was opened. The family court judge connected to the scheme suddenly found himself explaining years of case assignments to regulatory authorities. At Priya's nonprofit, board members received anonymous packages containing proof of her planned abuse allegations. These weren't angry accusations, they were cold, documented facts. 2 board members who had known Damon through his community work immediately called an emergency meeting. They had approved funding for programs Damon quietly supported. They had seen him mentor young men from troubled neighborhoods, teaching them landscaping skills and business basics. The idea that this man had been targeted for destruction through manufactured abuse claims was professionally and personally offensive to them. We need your resignation, the board chair told Priya in a closed-door meeting. The optics alone would destroy our credibility with community partners. Priya tried to argue, to reframe, to salvage, but her voice held no authority anymore. When she returned to her office, security was waiting to supervise her packing personal items. Her corporate credit card had already been deactivated. The reality of finances hit hard. Without Damon's business income supporting their lifestyle, Priya's salary, even at a senior nonprofit level, barely covered basic expenses. The luxury apartment she had already secretly looked at was suddenly out of reach. The lifestyle Bradley had supplemented with expensive gifts and hidden payments was evaporating. Meanwhile, Jerome's quiet work bore fruit. The business journalist who received Bradley's file recognized names immediately. Other women, other cities, other calculated manipulations. She had investigated Bradley before, but couldn't get sources to go on record. Now she had documentation, dates, bank records, property listings, a pattern so clear it told its own story. The piece ran in a respected financial publication, not front-page news, but perfectly positioned to reach the exact audience Bradley feared most. The headline was understated. Questions arise about venture partners' personal conduct. The content was devastating. Bradley's phone started ringing with calls he couldn't ignore. Investment partners wanted explanations. His firm's compliance department requested meetings. A woman he had recently become engaged to, carefully selected for her social connections, started asking uncomfortable questions about his past. He did what he had always done. He disappeared. Priya's calls went straight to voicemail. Her texts showed as delivered but unread. Within days, she saw social media posts of Bradley at charity events with his new fiancée, performing the same careful image management he had once performed with her. Something in Priya finally broke. She contacted the journalist directly. "I want to tell you everything," she said. "I have dates, conversations, evidence." The follow-up piece was like watching a controlled demolition. Priya's testimony was specific, detailed, and backed by documentation. She named names, described patterns, provided proof. Bradley's carefully constructed professional image began to crack. His new fiancée ended their engagement publicly. Two key investment partners announced restructuring that removed him from direct authority over major accounts. In the Nigerian community Adaize had so carefully cultivated, Tola and Bisi spoke truth without mercy. They described the dinner in detail, the recording, the documents, the proof of their aunt's role in orchestrating false abuse claims. Church members who had respected Adaize for decades began declining her calls. Community organizations removed her from leadership positions. The power she had accumulated through years of relationship building dissolved like sugar in hot water. Through it all, Damon simply worked. He met with city officials about the municipal contract. He hired 3 new employees. He approved equipment upgrades his crews had requested. Each morning he arrived before dawn, made coffee, and built the life he had always been building. Jerome kept tabs on everything but said little. When he heard about Priya's decision to go on record against Bradley, he didn't react. He simply packed his fishing gear, drove to his favorite spot on the Chesapeake, and spent a quiet afternoon watching his line drift in the current. Some things required no comment at all. The September morning air held that first hint of fall crispness as Damon pulled into the Coal Grounds management yard. Dawn was still just a promise on the horizon, but Curtis was already there, methodically sorting equipment for the day's routes. Beside him, working with careful attention, was Marcus, just 22, fresh from Damon's old neighborhood, learning the business the same way Damon had years ago. Damon watched them work for a moment before killing the engine. Curtis had that way about him, teaching without lecturing, showing the kid how to check equipment properly, how to load trucks efficiently, how to do things right the first time. It was exactly how this business was meant to work. Knowledge passed down, skills built up, foundations laid properly. The divorce had been finalized 10 months ago, wrapped up with none of the drama Priya and Adaize had planned. Once their legal strategy collapsed, Priya's attorneys quickly pivoted to settlement discussions. She walked away with what was legally and fairly hers, no more, no less. The manufactured abuse allegations were formally withdrawn as part of the agreement, leaving Damon's name and reputation untouched. In the months since, Coal Grounds management had grown steadily. They were up to 31 employees now, with 3 new trucks bearing the company logo. The municipal contract had opened doors, leading to conversations about a major community development project that would be the largest in the company's history. Damon had met with city officials twice already, and their response had been encouraging. He'd bought himself a house, nothing flashy, but solid. 3 bedrooms, good bones, with a detached workshop in the backyard where he spent Sunday mornings building furniture. The simple pleasure of working with his hands, creating something tangible, had become a kind of meditation. Last weekend, he'd finished a coffee table made from reclaimed oak. The week before that, a set of floating shelves for his mother's living room. Margot had helped him install those shelves. They'd been seeing each other for about 2 months now. Carefully, slowly, both of them conscious of not rushing. She was a landscape architect he'd met at a contractors' conference in Baltimore. Smart, funny in a quiet way, with a practical creativity that showed in her designs. She thought he was reserved, maybe a little too serious. She wasn't entirely wrong. Word had filtered back through industry channels about Priya. She'd landed at a smaller nonprofit in Richmond, handling mid-level development work. A step down from her previous role, but stable. She and Adaize barely spoke anymore. Something fundamental had broken between them at that dinner table, something neither seemed interested in repairing. Adaize still attended her church, still tried to position herself as a community elder, but her influence had waned dramatically. The careful network she'd built over decades had unraveled. People were polite, but the invitations to lead committees or speak at events had stopped coming. Bradley Holt's downfall hadn't been spectacular. No criminal charges, no public scandal. But it had been comprehensive. The documentation Jerome had placed with that journalist, combined with Priya's detailed testimony, had permanently altered his trajectory. He still worked in venture capital, but in smaller firms, on smaller deals. His reputation followed him quietly into every meeting, every introduction. He hadn't changed, but he'd been accurately labeled, and in his world, that made all the difference. Damon stepped out of his truck, coffee thermos in hand. The sky was beginning to lighten, painting the edges of clouds in soft orange and pink. Marcus looked up from his work, nodding respectfully. "Morning, Mr. Cole." "Morning, Marcus. How's your mother doing?" "Better, sir. That doctor you recommended. She really helped with Mom's back problems." Damon nodded, remembering his own mother's similar struggles years ago. "Good to hear. Let me know if she needs anything else." The morning crew would be arriving soon. Already he could hear the first trucks pulling into the lot, their headlights sweeping across the yard. He'd left some paperwork in his office last night, supply orders to review, a proposal to finalize for a new commercial client. Curtis straightened up from where he'd been checking a mower's fuel line. His eyes, observant as ever, studied Damon's face for a moment. "You good, boss?" Damon looked out at his yard. The neat rows of trucks with his name on their sides, the well-maintained equipment, the growing team of people who depended on him to keep building what he'd started. Everything he'd protected. Everything he'd kept growing. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.